Hello everyone, this is the second video in relation to question 3 for the alternative assessment on the human physiology aspects unit. So we need to talk about the respiratory system, because actually what we're doing is explaining how the cardiovascular system works with the respiratory system to deliver oxygen around the body. So the first question is, why do we need oxygen? And the reason is for respiration. You should have learnt about all that in macromolecules. It's there to create energy. But as a byproduct of that, we have to get rid of carbon dioxide, and that's what really the process of breathing is for. It's a mechanical process. It's the action of taking air into your lungs so that we can extract the oxygen and give back the carbon dioxide. Now, the proper term for breathing is pulmonary ventilation. So let's have a look at how that occurs. Here is the basic structure of the respiratory system. Now it's missing a bit off the top, so you'd have your mouth and your pharynx as well, but as air comes down that passage, obviously it passes the larynx, it goes down the trachea, and it splits into the bronchus, and then air will go into the bronchioles. And the same on this side, but you can't see the three-dimensional structure. Once it's in there, it will start sort of filling these sacs, which I'll show you later, called alveoli, and that's where the air fills, like air sacs. That's where we extract the oxygen from. What's really important for you to know at this point in time is that the ribs have muscles in between the ribs called intercostal muscles. So you've got these that are external, ones that I'm sort of colouring red, they're the external intercostal muscles, the ones that are on the outside, and then we've got the internal intercostal muscles, which are on the inside. It's really important, because what I'm going to talk about next is actually how physically, what's the physics behind us getting air inside the lungs. So 3 key rules that we need to know, and we're learning about the physics behind it. Winds blow from high to low. That was a favourite one from my geography teacher, Mr. Yeomans. Thank you for that. Volume changes lead to pressure changes. So you change the space of something, you change the pressure of it, and then gases always fill their container. So if I had a container here, put a lid on it, the gas would fill the container. They wouldn't just settle at the bottom, let's say like a liquid would. So let's have a look. This is Boyle's law. Might have given you nightmares from GCSE sort of physics lessons. All it means that is pressure times volume equals pressure times volume. So at a constant temperature, the pressure of a gas varies inversely with its volume, and that means that if you increase the volume, you decrease the pressure. Okay, which we'll look at. It's a little more straightforward than what you might think. So if we fill these two containers with gas and the same amount of gas, we'd have the same pressure in, right? So if you blew 2 balloons up with the same amount of gas, you'd have the same pressure. All right, these molecules, these gas molecules, be bouncing around and moving around. So we would have the same pressure in each one of these containers. What would happen if you shrunk the container? So there's still the same amount of gas in each container, but you've actually reduced the volume on this container. So reducing the volume means you're shrinking the container in this case. So which one would be under higher pressure? And the answer would be this one. So that's what that law meant earlier, the Boyle's law. It varies pressure varies inversely with volume. You reduce the volume, you increase the pressure, and that's exactly what's happened here. We've reduced the volume of the container, therefore we've increased the pressure. So if you connected those two containers with a tube, which way would the gases flow? Would they go from left to right, as you see, or would they go from right to left? Well, they go from high to low. Winds blow from high to low. We've just said that this area is high and this area is low because we've changed the volume, and therefore we get gases moving from high pressure areas to low pressure areas. And this is exactly how your lungs work. Take a deep breath. What happens? Well, when you take a breath, you expand your lungs, so you increase its volume. If you increase its volume, you reduce the pressure inside your lungs. So if you reduce the pressure lower than the atmosphere, i.e. the space around you, then air will flow from areas of high pressure to areas of low pressure. So you've done exactly what we said on that last slide. You've increased the volume in your lungs, therefore you have lowered the pressure. Winds blow from high to low, so air rushes into your lungs. So how do we do it? How do we make the lungs a bigger volume? Well, when we do that, the external intercostals pull the ribs together, so the ribs squeeze together, and by squeezing together we get this sort of upward motion of the chest. The ribs tilt outwards, the diaphragm contracts, so under relaxation the diaphragm is dome shaped, but when it contracts it moves down. So by what usually is such a shape, by moving the diaphragm downwards we open up the chest cavity, and when you open up the chest cavity you make the volume of the lungs increase. If you increase the volume, you lower the pressure. So if the outside world is high pressure, then air floods into your lungs, and that's exactly how your muscles increase the volume of your lungs and therefore move air into your lungs. That's called pulmonary ventilation. That's exactly how we're breathing right now. So here is the alveoli. So if you remember when I drew, or when we had the diagram up, we had the bronchioles, and I drew those what were red circles, these balls on the outside. So we're in one of these sort of ball-shaped things, and actually when the air comes in, it goes into the bronchioles and it fills all of these sacs. And so what we can see here is that when we breathe in during pulmonary ventilation, what we see is this air coming into the alveoli. That's what's happening when we breathe in. That's what's happening when the intercostal muscles contract and the diaphragm contracts. It draws air in because we've increased the volume and therefore reduced the pressure. Now, when this air comes in, what we have is a lot of oxygen in the air. We have a lot of oxygen in the air. Now, this is where the magic happens. This is the crux of the question that's been asked in this question 3 for the alternative exam. How does the respiratory system and the cardiovascular system work together to deliver oxygenated blood to the working cells, or to the body cells? What we have here is blood from the pulmonary artery, pulmonary meaning lungs, artery meaning away from the heart. That means it's deoxygenated. This blood is deoxygenated, it's got carbon dioxide in it, it's full of waste products. Well, what happens? Here we've got oxygen, which is under a high concentration. This is taking you back to your cell biology unit. There's a high concentration of oxygen. There is a low concentration of oxygen in the blood. So what happens? Passive diffusion, thank you very much. Oxygen diffuses into the blood. So actually when it comes round here, the blood is oxygenated. That's where the oxygenation of the blood occurs, and it goes back to the heart by the pulmonary vein. pulmonary meaning lungs, vein meaning into the heart. And that is where we get that working together of the cardiovascular system and the respiratory system. As you can see at the bottom of the diagram, carbon dioxide escapes into, that should say, into the blood. Into the lungs. So all this carbon dioxide that came back to the lungs, should I say, from into the heart and then is being pumped to the lungs, is under a high concentration. So there's a high concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood. Here's the low concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood. So all this carbon dioxide diffuses into the space inside the alveoli because it goes from high to low. And what happens then when we breathe out during expiration, all this carbon dioxide goes back up the bronchioles, the bronchi, the trachea, the larynx, the pharynx, and then we're breathing it out. That is as a result of gaseous exchange. And this, if you don't talk about anything else in your question 3 for the alternative assessment, you better talk about this, because this is what's going to give you the pass. This is where deoxygenated blood from the heart is carried via the pulmonary artery. It goes to the alveoli where the oxygen diffuses into the blood, the carbon dioxide diffuses into the lungs, and we breathe it out. The oxygenated blood returns back to the heart to be pumped around the body for energy, and that is really crucial for you answering the question. Here's just a picture of the alveoli, so that you can see it's a little bit like broccoli. You've got lots of different alveoli here, and one alveolus, which is a singular. So as you breathe in, that air comes down the bronchioles and it fills these alveoli or alveolus. So that's it again, just to sort of to re-emphasize what's going on. Now, the first part of the question is explain how an alveolus is structured to suit its function. Well, the alveolus is what's called is a special exchange surface, and it's a surface in multicellular organisms that suits the process of exchanging nutrients and gases really, really quickly. Normally that wouldn't happen. So in a muscle cell, in a let's say in a liver cell, it's not particularly great at exchanging things very, very fast or quick enough. So what we get in the alveoli is structures that really, really suit the giving up and taking of different things. One of the reasons why is that it's a large surface area. So the fact that they're balloon shaped means that they really get lots of surface area, so that when the blood's flowing over it, it can, it's got a lot of surface to pick that oxygen up as it passes, and also drop carbon dioxide off too. The epithelium of the alveoli, so if this is the alveoli, the epithelium, which means it's the lining, actually it's one cell thick, but they're also very flat. So the cells around the epithelium of an alveoli are really flat, which reduces the distance or it makes it sure that it's got a really small distance that the diffusion has to travel. So if I was a molecule of oxygen, I had to diffuse just that far, one cell thick. It's not very far, is it? But if I had to sort of go through layers and layers and layers of cells, it diffuse through this one, and it have to diffuse through this one, and I have to build up concentration each time to make it go from high to low. So the features of an efficient gas exchange surface, which is the same for an alveoli, is that it has thin walls, one cell thick in fact. The third point is that the alveoli have a really, really good blood supply, which means that they're surrounded in capillaries. The alveoli is surrounded in capillaries, which means that the blood's always taking it away, so it always maintains the concentration gradient in and outside of the alveolus. And finally, the inside of the alveoli is moist, and it's moist because the outside is blood. It's kind of fluid. It's fluidy. Now, if you had a dry inside lining, then you get tension forces between the two. So you'd have like tension in between here, and actually the shape of an alveoli would sort of cave in. It would become flattened, and it wouldn't work as well. So the inside of an alveoli has a moist lining which acts as a surfactant, which is a posh word. It just means that it reduces tension, reduces surface tension, and keeps that nice, lovely shape for a large surface area. That's why the alveoli is really suited to its job of soaking up oxygen out of the blood and giving back carbon dioxide really, really fast.